Hello everybody and welcome to another video. So a couple of weeks ago I did a video going through my N64 collection, and I said at the end I'd likely do videos for all the other games in my different systems collections. And today I thought I'd actually do that and go through the games on my Mega Drive, or if you're in North America, Genesis collection. Now, this is a console that is a little bit special to me. I didn't actually grow up with it. I had friends who had one, but it was one that I really loved when I was younger. I just loved the aesthetic of it. I loved the games that there were for it. I grew up being a big Sonic fan, so that definitely contributed. And yeah, for some strange reason, I actually never had one. I was brought up with an Amiga 500, and I think by the time my parents went to replace that, it was about 96, 97, and by that time the PlayStation was kind of the big thing. They got a good deal on the PlayStation. The Sega Saturn was out at that time, but it wasn't really doing well, as I've alluded to in videos before. So we went for the PlayStation, and I never did get the Mega Drive. But as I got older and I was able to get into retro games collecting, I thought, I kind of made the Mega Drive a priority to get hold of. It was something I really desired getting, and I was fortunate enough to have a friend, a very good friend of mine, who had one from when he was younger, and he was looking to just get rid of it, and he handed it over. So since then I've been building up a steady collection of Mega Drive games. Some of the ones are ones that I used to play when I was younger. Some I haven't been able to get hold of. I do have fond memories of having a good friend when I was younger, going around his house and playing on his Mega Drive. That's where I played Sonic 2 for the first time, which became one of my favourite games of all time. It's where I played Street Fighter for the first time. It's where I played Mortal Kombat. It's where I played this quirky little platformer called Green Dog, where you're this beached surfer dude who lands on this weird sort of ancient island. And that's actually a game I'm getting again. It's going to be a Christmas present off my parents later this year, so I'm looking forward to hopefully playing that next year. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the boxed games first, like I did for the N64, and then we'll go through the loose cartridges. So let's take a look. So, boxed games. So the Mega Drive boxes were generally plastic based like this, kind of like a VHS box, I guess you'd say, from back in the day. And you'd open it up, you'd have your manual and your cartridge itself. So the first game, as you have seen, is Alien 3. I've heard talk that this is the definitive version of Alien 3 for the various platforms it came out for. Whether that's true or not, I don't know. I haven't really compared them. But it is a damn fine game. It's an action platformer which sees you taken on the role of Ripley. You have to go through these maze-like levels to rescue your sort of like compatriot humans that have been taken hostage by the aliens, and it's fun, but it's quite a tough game as well. You kind of set against quite a tough time limit in there. The aliens are quite hard to fight. It feels a little bit clunky, but it's got a good atmosphere to it. It's definitely one I'd recommend, and I think this only cost about £12 to £15, so unfortunately it's one that I don't think has seen a re-release for any platform. A lot of these old licensed games don't tend to, although I think they are getting better at it more recently, as is the case with the next game on the list, which is Disney's Aladdin. Aladdin was one of many Disney licensed games back in that era that were really bloody good. I know it's kind of sometimes hard to believe that licensed games can be good. I mean, even back then they weren't always great, but Disney licensed stuff had a very good track record. They always tended to be sort of platformers, and they were known for being quite difficult as well. There's talk that this is because of the rental market at the time. You had shops like Blockbuster Video, which would rent games out to people. So instead of buying the games, you'd take your parents would take their kids, go rent a game for the weekend, play it, complete it, take it back. Obviously, that didn't earn the developers enough money. It wasn't getting them a lot of money for it. So it was said that sometimes they'd make the games a lot harder so that, the kids would go back and rent the game again and again, weekend on weekend, so that eventually they would get through it, rather than just buying the full thing. So Aladdin's very good. It's very charming. It's different to the Super Nintendo version. I believe that was a different developer. It might have been Capcom. This is Virgin Interactive who made this one. Definitely would recommend getting hold of it. And you can get hold of this quite easily nowadays. They released a compilation pack for modern platforms, which also includes Lion King. And I think they re-released that as a free pack, including Jungle Book. Next up is another Disney licensed platform, and this is one I have not played, but it came with the Mega Drive when my friend gave me it. It's Disney's Bonkers. I think this was meant to be the start of like a new franchise, a new sort of mascot character Disney were creating. I don't necessarily think he was very successful. Maybe people do remember him fondly. I certainly do not remember him at all. This is meant to be decent. It's meant to be an alright game. I will need to give it a try at some point. I don't mind a decent sort of mascot platformer, and I think this is part of that wave of cartoons in the 90s that was sort of becoming a little bit more self-aware, maybe not quite as hard going as like Animaniacs did, or certainly the Cartoon Network cartoons did, but it was part of that little initial wave, I think. We've got another platformer now, another mascot platformer called Cool Spot, another Virgin Interactive game. They were very active back in the early 90s for releasing games. Cool Spot, you might be wondering what Cool Spot is the mascot for. Some of you, I imagine, are already not knowledgeable about this. Cool Spot is the dot from the 7-Up can. Why the dot from the 7-Up can became alive and has sunglasses on, I don't know. But the premise here is Cool Spot has to rescue all of his friends. It's got a lot of like, you know, early 90s, cool, radical kind of stuff to it. It's a pretty decent, if not very tough platformer as well. I'm not sure how well it's aged. It's quite floaty in that last time I played it. I like it, but again, that could be a little bit of nostalgia goggles talking there. But, you know, definitely worth checking out, especially part of that history of quirky mascot platformers. Next up is another one that my friend had when he gave me the system, and I'm surprised he had this because he always tells me he hates the FIFA games, and maybe this is why, but it is FIFA 95. I kind of think you always want a sort of sports game for these older systems, because if you invite friends around, they're very easy to put on, and some of these older sports games, unlike the newer ones, are much more pick up and play than the newer ones can be. You know, as you introduce more buttons to controllers, more functionality, they become a bit harder to pick up and play, whereas these tended to be, you know, you had your 3 buttons in your controller, one was pass, one was shoot, one was tackle. This is decent, not my favourite football game on the Mega Drive, but we're going to get to that in the next one, but probably worth checking out. It's also interesting to check them out just so you can see the roster of players. If you're like me and were brought up, you know, in the 90s, you'll probably remember some of the names. But next up is a football game I would recommend checking out. International Sensible Soccer. Sensible Soccer, if you're an Amiga owner, was the football game. A lot of people from that era still think Sensible Soccer is the greatest football game ever made. I'm not sure I would agree with that. I probably would say Pro Evolution Soccer 4 on the PS2 is probably my favourite, but this is very good, and if you want a game that's very easy to pick up and play, you cannot go wrong with Sensible Soccer. There were numerous ones around at the time. There was just the standard Sensible Soccer, there was World of Sensible Soccer, there was International Sensible Soccer, which kind of featured World Cup teams at the time, because obviously the World Cup happened in 1994, it was big deal. Well, actually, no, this was released before 94, so this might be more of a tie-in with the 1991, but seriously, in 92, 93, but yeah, you don't even know the games back in those days. But Sensible Soccer is really fun. The one thing I do like about Sensible Soccer as well is it had a good sense of humour. Sensible Software through their games always kind of had this. You have like teams here based on just random things, like At the Chippy, where your players are called like Cod, Haddock, Curry Sauce, that kind of thing, and I always appreciated that. Next up is a game that got a 95% from Mean Machines, and it is James Pond 2, codename Robocod. This is another one that was sort of one of the platformers for the Amiga. I remember a lot of Amiga owners loving this. I didn't personally grow up with this one. I had a friend who's still a very good friend who did, and he loves it. We're talking about mascot platformers earlier. This is quite an interesting one as well. Some versions of this had a tie-in with Penguin, the Biscuit People. It's fun, although I will say, when I play this, I found some of the backgrounds to be very obnoxiously loud and overly colourful. So you might have a little bit of issue with that. It's very bright, very of the time, very early 90s. But I think it's definitely worth a go. This has been re-released on so many modern platforms now, you won't believe. It's still kind of getting re-releases. I don't even know who owns the rights to it. But you can get hold of this, I think, even for the Switch. We have another game now, our first racing game of the Mega Drive, and it's Lotus 2 Rex. Rex stands for the Race Environment Construction System. The draw with this was, right, not only did you get your Lotus Turbo Challenge kind of gameplay, but you had a track constructor where you put in a number of parameters and it would construct a track based off that. It would then spit out a number seed which you could take around your friends' houses and play that track, or if you liked it, play it again and again. This is interesting because this is actually a part of Lotus 3 for the Amiga, but because it was only the second Lotus game on the Mega Drive, it got called Lotus 2. It's a bit different in some other ways, I believe, but it is by and large a part of Lotus 3, which is actually one of the first games I remember playing properly. It's certainly the first game I played on the Amiga. So I really like this. It had a great soundtrack, and I don't know how well it holds up against other racing games on there. I'm not really an expert when it comes to racing games on the Mega Drive, but I love it. I think it's really, really fun. Next up is not just a single game. This is something that Sega would release quite a number of. As you can see, there's a number 6 on here. It's Mega Game 6. I got this for one game in particular, but it's got quite a few what you would call bangers on here. I don't know why I said it like that. You've got World Cup Italia. You've got Golden Axe, which many of you will probably have a great fondness for. It's sort of, well, not a co-op, but it is a hack and slash based on an arcade machine game where you play as one of 3 characters, as like a barbarian man, a barbarian woman, and a dwarf, and you can use magical powers, and you sort of have to get your way from one side. It's a side-scrolling beat-em-up, basically. It's really, really fun. I love Golden Axe. You got Streets of Rage on there. The first one, which on its own can go for quite a bit, so being able to get it as part of Mega Games is quite worthwhile. Streets of Rage again, side-scrolling beat-em-up. Many people consider the Streets of Rage series to be the pinnacle, with Streets of Rage 2 being a particular favourite amongst many. I'm quite honestly rubbish at them. I love them, but I'm not very good. Revenge of Shinobi, once I can say it right. Another sort of side-scrolling action platformer game based on the Shinobi, well, it is part of the Shinobi series. It was a big series back in the day, but I don't think it's really around. Hasn't been around for a very long time, but people have a great fondness for it. It is a good game. It's quite tough, as a lot of them are. Super Hang-On is a bike racing game which I've never really actually sat down and played outside of like just testing the game out. It was alright from what I remember, but I need to play it more. And finally, the game that I actually got this for, Columns. Columns is the quintessential puzzle game for the Mega Drive. Concept is very simple. You've got different coloured blocks of 3 coming from the sky, very Tetris-like. You've got to arrange them and create combinations of the columns there. I have heard some slander against Columns in the last few years, and I will not stand for it. Columns is a fantastic game. It is the game that everyone loved for the Mega Drive. If your mum saw you playing Columns, she'd want to play Columns, and she'd take the Mega Drive from you and play it. I mean, that's not my experience. I didn't have a Mega Drive, but it's that sort of game. I know a lot of people have fondness for it. I have fondness for it. It's a great game. I won't hear any slander against it. We love Columns in this house. Next up, this is a game that my friend who gave me the Mega Drive told me about. It was one of his favourites as a kid, so I thought I will check it out. It's a game called Mercs. This is a top-down shooter where you control a mercenary from one part of a map to another, shooting enemies. Again, as with all these games, it's a repeating theme, but it can be quite tricky at times. You get power-ups for your Merc, you have to choose where to put the power-ups. This is actually really fun. It's a little bit of a gem. I do agree with my friend, it's very, very good. I really enjoyed it, and when we had him over, we would, do like a level each or a life each. It's one I would actually recommend checking this out if you can, and you can see the price on that. I got it from Super Games World for £14. Next up is another racing game, and this is one I did not know was on the Mega Drive when I was a kid. I had this for the PlayStation, actually, which I think is probably the better version, just because better graphics such at the time. It's a Street Racer. It's a kart racing game in a similar vein to your Mario Karts and such. You pick from one of dodgily made characters. There's a few based on dodgy ethnic stereotypes in this, very of the time. I won't go into them. But it's a fairly fun kart racing game. It's got a few little interesting little mini games in there as well. It's good. It's decent. It's maybe people won't like it as much as they do Mario Kart. Some other kart races out there. I know there are certainly better ones, but it's okay. I thought the PlayStation version was better. We're back to another Disney platformer, Toy Story. I only got this a couple of weeks ago. Played a fair bit of it, really do like it. Again, it follows that thing with Aladdin, that it was very, very tough, but it's really nice, it's really charming. As with Aladdin, you get like little Mega Drive versions of the themes and music you remember from Toy Story. It goes through the story of the game. The graphics are really nice, sort of, not realistic, but I can't really describe what the style is, but it's one you will know. Very similar, I suppose, to kind of what Donkey Kong was doing. That sort of really hyper, stylized look, kind of not semi-realistic, because it's a Mega Drive. It couldn't be that realistic. But it's good. It's very tough, but again, I can't not recommend it, because it is just a good game. We have the third in a series now. We have Urban Strikes. This is the third in the Strike series. I'll talk about them a bit more once I get to the loose cartridges, because I have the first of the series here, but this is a simple premise. It's a top-down shooter. You're a helicopter pilot. You have various objectives to do on the map, and that's it, really. You have to maintain your helicopter by making sure it's stocked up with ammunition, fuel, armor. You have loads of enemies to shoot. Again, very hard. A lot of these games were. But I love the Strike series, so I will talk about them a little bit more in the loose cartridges. And finally, this is a gift off a friend. This is Wrestle War. I found this really interesting because it's sort of very early in the evolution of wrestling games. And one thing that it does that I thought was quite amusing is instead of having you fight in the middle of the ring, and the ring, you see the whole ring on the screen. It's actually various parts of the ring are various screens. This was fun. It's not licensed by any particular company, but some of the characters in it you can see are based off of popular wrestlers of the time. So I would cheekily check this one out if you can find it cheap enough, because I find it interesting to see how wrestling games have evolved over the years. I'm a huge wrestling fan, so seeing how they were early 90s through to what we have now with the massive production values of like WWE 2K series, or what AEW done with Fight Forever, to go back to where some of them started. It's really cool. So there's the boxed games. Let's have a look at the loose cartridges, shall we? Okay, so loose cartridge wise, we are going to start with Desert Strike. So I mentioned Urban Strike earlier, which was the third in the series. This is the first in the series. Desert Strike returns to the Gulf, obviously releasing sort of, maybe taking advantage of the Gulf War tensions of the time. Obviously that was quite a big thing in the media. I don't remember it too much because I was very young, but you see drips and drabs. I love Desert Strike. I had this for the Amiga. It's, like I mentioned for Urban Strike, you're a helicopter pilot, you've got various objectives on the map to do. Sometimes you can do them in any order, but there is a preferred order to do it in. And these objectives might be as simple as blow up a radar station, it could be rescue a bunch of hostages, it could be take out, these aeroplanes or whatever on the ground. It's very fun. I really adore this series, and I'm surprised it hasn't sort of seen any sort of re-release or recent ports, to be honest with you. There were a few in an EA collection for the PSP, but it seems to be very quiet on that front. But if you can, I would definitely recommend checking out the Strike games. There were 5 of them in total. There was Desert Strike, we'll get the Jungle Strike in a second, there was Urban Strike. It was like Desert Strike was, it's set in like the Gulf. Jungle Strike was set over the jungle. Urban Strike was more urban environments. Then we moved on to the next generation of consoles. I think the Saturn and PlayStation had Soviet Strike, which is the same game but in Soviet regions. And then we had Nuclear Strike for the N64 and PlayStation again. And that was exactly the same game, but with more sort of nuclear tension thrown in there. There was always kind of the risk of nuclear tension in these, but that one really kind of hammered it home. There is technically a 6th game in the series, but it is not called Strike. It was originally developed as a Strike game called Future Strike, but it became Future Cop LAPD, I think it's called, for the PlayStation. I do have it, but it's for the PlayStation, so we might talk about that and cover it at some point in the future. But Desert Strike, absolute recommend. Now, I've blabbed on about that too long. We'll go very quickly through the next one. It's a loose cartridge of FIFA 95. I have this because at one point the Mega Drive, I thought the Mega Drive was bust, so I got a replacement one, and it came with a handful of games, and FIFA 95 was one of them. Jungle Strike, I mentioned this. It's Desert Strike, but it's set in the jungle. You can't go wrong with any of them. They're all kind of similar template, but they do add new things each time on. I think you get some additional vehicles in Urban Strike and so on. But yeah, again, these weren't expensive, the Strike series, so you can get all three of them, I think, for under £30, especially if you go unboxed. Now, Sonic 1. Sonic 1, I think if you've got a Mega Drive, you have to have Sonic 1. Some Mega Drives came with it built in. It's the start of a franchise, really. There's not really much more to say. You play as Sonic, a blue hedgehog that goes really, really fast. This is probably my least favourite of the classic 2D platformers, admittedly, because it's where it all started, and I think they radically improved it each time it went on. But I still would not say don't sleep on the game. Definitely do check it out. It's been re-released numerous times. You can get this on modern platforms. You've got like the Sonic collection on the PS5 and Xbox One and that, so not hard to get hold of. But I think if you have a Mega Drive, you owe it to yourself to make sure you get the Sonic games. Next up, we have my personal favourite in the Sonic franchise, Sonic 2. I have such fond memories of playing this around a best friend's house when I was younger. We spent hours playing it. I don't think we ever were able to complete it. We managed to get up to, I think, Sky Chase or Wing Fortress and then couldn't really get past that. As an adult, I can complete this in about an hour and 10 minutes. There is a Let's Play of it on the channel. I love this game. It's like a comfort game for me. It's top 5 of all time. Absolute comfort game. I love the zone design. I love the level. I love the music in it. I love so much about it. Again, as with Sonic 1, it's been re-released as numerous collections, so it's not hard to get hold of. Now we have what is many people's favourite Sonic game, Sonic 3. I personally, this is probably my second or third favourite. I mean, they're all good, so it's like when I say my third or fourth favourite, it's not exactly saying the game's bad. I just don't, there's just some zones in this I'm not really as keen on, but it's still a really good game. It introduces the character of Knuckles, who we'll discuss in a moment, because I think some of you might already have guessed what the next game is, and I'm going to leave this to one side to demonstrate it. But next up is Sonic and Knuckles, which is, it's like the fourth in there. And you might notice the cartridge is different here. Many of you will already know this, but for those who don't, this is called a lock-on cartridge. The idea was Sonic and Knuckles and Sonic 3 were going to be one big game, but it got too big, I believe, and they were running out of time to release them all. So they split it into two, released it as a lock-on. So what you can do is you can take your Sonic 3 cartridge, pop it on top, and what that does, it combines the games into Sonic 3 and Knuckles for like the ultimate experience, the full story, so to speak. But what you can also do, you can take your Sonic 2 cartridge and do exactly the same, and that puts Knuckles in Sonic 2, which is really, really cool, because you get all of Knuckles' functionality throughout it. You can also do the same with the Sonic 1 cartridge, but it doesn't put Knuckles in Sonic 1. What it does, it instead does like an enhanced version of the bonus stages from Sonic 3 and Knuckles, the Blue Sphere one. And if you put any other cartridge in there, it just comes up saying no way, and you can go into Blue Sphere anywhere. But I love that as a technology. I always thought that was really, really cool. I always could wonder as a kid what they're going to do. They're going to do anything else like that, and they didn't, obviously. But you might find pictures on the internet showing the lock-on cartridge with several other cartridge things you can put into the Mega Drive to create the ultimate tower of Sega. So next up, I'm a huge Trekkie. So this is a game that I did want to get hold of, Star Trek Deep Space Nine. There weren't many games released based on Deep Space Nine, I believe. This is one of them. I've not played this too much. I played it a little bit and got stuck at the beginning. I keep on wanting to get around to it, but I've been waiting for the right opportunity to do so, because I think it's going to be one of my games I wanted to play. Perhaps next year we'll take a look at that properly. And the next three I'm going to go through quickly, because these came with the replacement Mega Drive, but I haven't actually got around to playing them. So we've got Techno Clash. I admittedly don't really know what that is. We've got World Tournament Soccer. I think I played one match on this. It was alright, but it wasn't as good as FIFA or Sensible Soccer. And finally, a game called Zero Tolerance, which, again, I just have not sat down to play this or really had the time. But I probably will give them a go at some point just to see what they're like. And there you have it. That's a quick look at my Mega Drive collection. So do let me know in the comments if you had a Mega Drive or Genesis growing up, what some of your favourite games were for it, any memories you might have on it. Maybe if I've inspired you to check anything out here. I know there are so many games out there for that system that people have a fondness for and love. So I would love to know what you all thought of that system and your own favourites. And again, thank you very much for taking the time to watch this. We'll do this again with another retro collection in the future. And I will see you again in another video. Goodbye.